Hey, it's Friday. It's TGIF Doc Talk with Dr. Go. Click the share button to share this episode to a friend or a caregiver and hit follow to keep up with our latest episodes. Thank you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Doc Talk. And today we'll be talking about how to identify signs that your aging parent needs extra care. When is it time for a senior daycare? So, first and foremost, when we look at an elderly person, as they start to age, they face different life challenges compared to when they were younger. And when an elderly person ages, of course, not only their body gets weaker, their mind also starts to deteriorate. And typically, a large factor which is involved here is social isolation. Because they don't have the ability to go around on their own, they can't drive around on their own. Most of their friends might have already passed on, so they are often very much alone and isolated at home. And social isolation is one of the major factors to consider when you think about sending your elderly parent to senior daycare. So very often you find that your parent, your mom or your dad might always be at home alone watching TV, or maybe just facing the four walls or a helper, and they might feel very lonely or disconnected. And one of the telltale signs is when they start to develop some kind of social anxiety. When they go out in public, they just suddenly don't know how to act, or they just become very anxious. And because they have been always alone for a very long time, and they get very socially anxious, or they start to get a bit depressed, they get very irritated, get very nervous, throw tantrums a lot. So a lot of times this kind of elderly daycare can actually help with solving this kind of social isolation or psychiatry issues related to social isolation. So this is one of the signs where you should start to consider sending your elderly parent to a place where they can socialize and make friends with some structured activities. The other factor that we need to consider is that when we see that this particular elderly person has very noticeable cognitive decline. So, for example, very often I get asked by family members, "Oh, my mom, she's been living alone all this while, and recently she called me. She said that she lost her way and she's now in the police station." Or you might even get calls from the neighbor saying that they smell a burning smell coming from your mother's house, and or she left the kitchen fire on, and or she might just randomly start calling other people, talking about things maybe like 10 years ago. And these kind of situations, you kind of understand that your elderly parent is starting to have early signs of dementia. And this is actually a very good time where you actually think about having a more structured activities, cognitive stimuli activities. It could be exercises, it could be memory games, it could be art and crafts, which is usually done in the daycare center. And this actually helps to build that kind of neural networks within their brain to actually prolong the deterioration process, and it helps to slow down the dementia. One other thing, as I mentioned, partly was the safety concerns of living alone at home. As I mentioned, when a person starts to have early dementia, the biggest safety concern is fire, because every time they forget to off the stove, or they start cooking and then they totally forgot that they started cooking and the kitchen gets burned down. This is one of the typical examples. Some other examples is especially when the elderly person has a very frail body, and you just don't know whether they will just fall down and unable to call for help, because when they've fallen down, they can't actually reach their phone to call someone for help. And very often I hear family members, the children actually, when they go and meet the elderly parents, oh, it's already a bit too late, they've been on the floor for more than 24 hours, haven't eaten anything, and they pass motion right beside them. This kind of situations where it's very concerning, relating to the elderly person, and being in a senior daycare community can actually help offer some form of supervision to reduce the risk. And finally, last but not least, is actually relating not to the elderly individual themselves, but rather it relates to the carer. So very often, as individuals who for people who are in their 40s or 50s, they not only have a job, a full-time job, they also have to take care of their children, their spouse, sometimes even their in-laws. And when you are dealing with an elderly parent who is quite frail and quite having starting to have a bit of cognitive decline, starting to have early signs of dementia, the primary caregiver will very, very often feel very overwhelmed, and they just can't cope to provide the level of care that is needed. So it usually is a lady, or the primary caregiver might be a housewife who is in maybe late 40s and have 3 kids, husband, and it's just so chaotic at home, and then something happens with the elderly parent and they just can't take it anymore. So sometimes this kind of senior daycare centers can actually provide a lot of relief to this burden. I'm not saying burden as a bad thing, but it's a mind burden. It's like this, giving them a little breather and just taking a little bit of stress out of their life, and so they can at least don't be too stressed out with all that's happening at home. So in summary, those are my key takeaways. Like, when do you actually consider sending your elderly parent to a senior daycare center where they can have not only a safe environment, structured activities to prevent cognitive decline, and also build that kind of friendship among themselves, among the elderly folks themselves, to prevent any form of social isolation, and finally to prevent the burnout of the primary caregiver. So that's all, and thank you. If you like this podcast, please do not forget to like, share, and follow us. Thank you.